What happens when a woman carrying new life must navigate through death itself? The answer lies buried in classified files from Eastern Europe, where intelligence protocols were shattered by someone the enemy never saw coming. Invisible by design, underestimated by choice, but carrying secrets that could change the course of history. This is the story of how being pregnant became the perfect cover for the most dangerous mission of the 21st century. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Joanna Fleming had mastered the art of disappearing in crowds. At 28, she moved through the bustling corridors of the CIA's Langley headquarters like water flowing around stones, present but unnoticed, essential yet invisible. Her modest desk in the Eastern European Analysis Division sat tucked between filing cabinets and the temperamental coffee machine that gurgled complaints throughout the day. The smell of stale coffee and recycled air had become her world, a universe away from the fieldwork that haunted her dreams. But invisibility had always been Joanna's greatest weapon. What her colleagues in their pressed suits and polished shoes didn't know was that she possessed a mind capable of unraveling enemy networks with mathematical precision and linguistic abilities that bordered on supernatural. During her 5 years as a case officer operating in the Balkans under non-official cover, she had mastered 7 languages fluently and could blend seamlessly into a dozen different cultural identities. Her handlers had called her the chameleon, someone who could become anyone, anywhere, at any time. Joanna's specialty was deep cover infiltration in environments where traditional operatives would be spotted immediately. She had spent 18 months as a medical translator in Serbian hospitals, gathering intelligence on arms trafficking networks. Another year as a Romanian archaeology student, mapping smuggling routes through ancient cave systems. Her greatest triumph had been a 6-month operation posing as a Ukrainian art dealer, where she had dismantled an entire money laundering operation, funding terrorist cells across 3 countries. The bureaucratic machinery had labeled her, administratively, reassigned during a departmental restructuring, burying her field reports in classified archives without proper attribution. Joanna Fleming, the woman who had prevented 2 major terrorist attacks and saved countless lives through her infiltration work, was quietly transferred to a desk job and forgotten. Her revolutionary approach to cultural immersion and psychological profiling techniques that allowed her to maintain cover identities for months without detection had been classified and shelved without recognition. But some talents are too dangerous to stay buried forever. The encrypted message that would change everything arrived on a Tuesday morning that seemed destined for routine analysis. Joanna had been reviewing satellite imagery of suspected weapons facilities in Moldova when her secure terminal chimed with an urgent priority classification. The sender was Deputy Director Sarah Matthews, a woman whose reputation for ice-cold decision-making was legendary throughout the intelligence community. Her cramped apartment in Arlington overlooked a small park where she began each morning with tea from a chipped mug, watching joggers trace familiar patterns through autumn leaves. The shadows of bare branches danced across her kitchen wall like memories she wasn't ready to confront. The night before receiving Matthew's message, Joanna had sat at her folding table with intelligence reports spread like puzzle pieces, her mind automatically analyzing patterns and connections that her colleagues had missed. Her fingers moved across keyboard shortcuts with muscle memory, cross-referencing data points and following digital breadcrumbs through networks that most analysts couldn't even perceive. Some knowledge becomes instinctive after years of survival, depending on split-second decisions and perfect character immersion. But there was something else now, a secret she carried, that made everything more complicated, more dangerous, and, paradoxically, more perfect for what was coming. Joanna was 12 weeks pregnant. The pregnancy had been unplanned, the result of a brief relationship with Dr. Michael Chun, a linguistics professor she'd met during a conference on Eastern European dialects. Their connection had been intense but short-lived. He was brilliant and kind, but couldn't understand why she always seemed to be holding back parts of herself. How could she explain that sharing her real life might literally get people killed? The relationship had ended amicably when he accepted a position at Oxford, neither of them knowing about the life they had created together. She had discovered the pregnancy 3 weeks ago during a routine medical checkup, staring at test results. That changed everything. The CIA's maternity leave policies were generous, but they typically involved immediate reassignment away from any operational duties. Pregnant officers were considered security risks, emotionally compromised, physically vulnerable, and potentially unreliable under pressure. Most women in her position would have quietly accepted administrative duties until after their children were born, but Joanna Fleming was not most women. And Deputy Director Matthews' message was about to prove that sometimes the most dangerous assumptions were the ones people made about mothers. The secure facility where Joanna met Matthews was a nondescript office building in downtown D.C., the kind of place that looked like it housed insurance companies or accounting firms. The Deputy Director's temporary office was spartanly furnished, just a desk, 2 chairs, and windows that had been electronically treated to prevent surveillance. Matthews was a compact woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. The kind of intelligence professional who had survived 3 decades in a male-dominated field through a combination of brilliance and absolute ruthlessness. Fleming, Matthews began without preamble. We have a problem that requires unconventional solutions. She slid a thick folder across the desk, its red classification stripe indicating material that could destabilize governments. Operation Nightingale. Are you familiar with Dr. Viktor Kozlov? Joanna was indeed familiar with Kozlov. He was a Russian biochemist who had defected 18 months ago, claiming to possess information about a new class of biological weapons being developed in secret facilities. The defection had been a major intelligence coup, but Kozlov had demanded specific conditions for his cooperation. He would only share his knowledge with American operatives who could prove their scientific credibility through detailed biochemical discussions in perfect Russian. He's been compromised, Matthews continued, watching Joanna's reaction carefully. Our sources indicate that Russian intelligence has located him in the safe house facility we established in Prague. They're planning an extraction operation within the next 72 hours. Joanna opened the folder and began scanning the operational details. Kozlov was being held in a fortified compound designed to look like a private medical research facility. The location was perfect for his cover story, a collaboration between American and Czech researchers on infectious disease protocols, but it was also perfect for a hostile extraction. The facility was isolated, heavily secured, and filled with the kind of sophisticated equipment that would appeal to someone planning to disappear a valuable asset permanently. The problem, Matthews said, leaning back in her chair, is that Kozlov refuses to be moved. He's paranoid about Russian retaliation and convinced that any change in his routine will expose him to assassination attempts. He'll only continue cooperation if he believes his environment is completely normal and secure. Joanna studied the facility layout, noting sight lines, security protocols, and potential infiltration routes. What kind of extraction are we expecting? Intelligence suggests a team of 8 to 12 Spetsnaz operatives with full tactical support. They'll likely pose as medical personnel or researchers to gain initial access, then use overwhelming force to secure Kozlov and eliminate witnesses. Matthews paused, letting the implications sink in. We need someone inside that facility who can protect our asset and gather intelligence on Russian capabilities. Someone who can maintain perfect cover while potentially engaging in combat operations. The challenge was extraordinary. Traditional operatives would be detected immediately, The facility's medical cover required staff with legitimate scientific credentials and native-level language skills. Anyone inserted into the environment would need to convincingly portray a researcher while simultaneously preparing for violent confrontation with elite military units. It was exactly the kind of impossible mission that had made Joanna's reputation in the field. "There's one more complication," Matthews added, her tone carefully neutral. "The facility specializes in maternal and fetal health research. The cover identity we've prepared requires someone who can convincingly portray a pregnant researcher studying the effects of environmental toxins on developing fetuses." Joanna felt pieces clicking into place like a perfect puzzle. The mission wasn't just unconventional, it was specifically designed for someone in her exact situation. A pregnant operative could move through the facility with complete legitimacy, access restricted areas under the guise of medical research, and carry concealed equipment that would never be detected, because no one would suspect the expectant mother of being a lethal intelligence operative. "You know about my condition," Joanna said. It wasn't a question. Matthews nodded. "Your medical records are part of your security clearance file. When this mission parameters became clear, your name was the only one that made sense." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "Fleming, I won't lie to you. This is an extremely dangerous assignment. You'd be operating alone, potentially outnumbered 12-1, while protecting both yourself and an unborn child. It violates every protocol we have about pregnant operatives." Joanna closed the folder and met Matthew's gaze steadily. "But it's also the perfect cover. No one suspects a pregnant woman of being capable of combat operations. I could move through that facility completely invisible until the moment I needed to strike." "Exactly. Your pregnancy isn't a liability, it's the mission's greatest asset. But I need to know if you're willing to take this risk. No one would question your decision to decline." Joanna thought about Dr. Kozlov, alone in his safe house with knowledge that could save thousands of lives. She thought about the Russian operatives planning to extract him, probably planning to torture him for every detail before eliminating him permanently. She thought about the biological weapons he claimed to know about, weapons that could target pregnant women and unborn children specifically. Most of all, she thought about her unborn child growing inside her, and the world she wanted that child to inherit. A world where people like Kozlov could defect safely, where biological weapons couldn't threaten innocent families, where mothers didn't have to choose between protecting their children and protecting everyone else's children. "When do I leave?" Joanna asked. Matthews smiled for the first time during their meeting. "Your flight to Prague departs tomorrow morning. Your cover identity is Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a biochemist from Johns Hopkins studying environmental impacts on fetal development. You'll have 48 hours to establish your position before the extraction team arrives." As Joanna left the meeting, she felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with accepting impossible missions. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't just fighting for national security or intelligence objectives. She was fighting for the future, both the world's future and the small life growing inside her that had somehow become the key to saving them all. The enemy would never see her coming because they could never imagine that their greatest threat would arrive, disguised as new life itself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Prague at dawn looked like a city caught between dreams and reality. Gothic spires pierced through morning fog, while cobblestone streets glistened with dew that had accumulated during the night. Joanna Fleming stepped off the charter flight at Václav Havel Airport, her transformation into Dr. Jennifer Walsh already complete. The pregnancy that had once seemed like a complication now felt like invisible protection that made her simultaneously vulnerable and untouchable. Her cover documentation was flawless. Johns Hopkins University had created a complete academic history for Dr. Jennifer Walsh, including published research, papers on environmental toxicology and fetal development that had been inserted into medical databases worldwide. Her fictional work on industrial chemical exposure during pregnancy was compelling enough to justify her presence at the Prague Medical Research Institute, while remaining obscure enough to avoid detailed scrutiny from colleagues who might actually understand the field. The taxi ride through Prague's winding streets gave Joanna time to review her final mission parameters. The Prague Medical Research Institute occupied a converted 19th-century mansion on the outskirts of the city, its Gothic architecture providing perfect cover for the sophisticated security systems. Hidden behind classical facades, Dr. Viktor Kozlov was being housed in the facility's secured wing under the cover story of a joint Czech-American research project studying radiation exposure effects on reproductive health. What made the facility perfect for Kozlov's protection also made it ideal for infiltration. The building's complex layout included multiple entrances, service corridors, and basement levels that connected to Prague's ancient underground tunnel system. But those same features would allow Russian extraction teams to approach from multiple directions simultaneously, potentially overwhelming the security forces before anyone could react. Joanna's pregnancy was 12 weeks along, visible enough to be believable, but not yet advanced enough to significantly limit her physical capabilities. She had spent the previous evening studying the latest research on fetal development, memorizing details that would allow her to discuss her condition with medical professionals without raising suspicion. Her cover required her to be concerned about potential chemical exposures in the laboratory environment, providing a natural reason to ask detailed questions about facility security and emergency protocols. The Prague Medical Research Institute impressed even someone with Joanna's experience in sophisticated operations. The main building featured state-of-the-art laboratories, clean rooms, and research facilities that rivaled anything at major American universities. Dr. Helena Novak, the facility director, greeted Joanna personally with warmth that seemed genuine, despite the underlying tension that permeated the entire complex. "Dr. Walsh, welcome to Prague," Dr. Novak said in accented but perfect English. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and intelligent eyes that missed very little. "I trust your flight was comfortable? We're so pleased to have Johns Hopkins participating in our environmental health initiative." Joanna smiled and placed a protective hand over her barely visible bump, a gesture that had become second nature during her preparation. "Thank you, Dr. Novak. I'm particularly interested in your work on industrial toxin exposure during pregnancy. My own condition makes this research personally relevant as well as professionally important." The comment served multiple purposes. It established her pregnancy as central to her research interests, created natural conversation topics with other researchers, and provided justification for asking detailed questions about safety protocols and emergency procedures. Most importantly, it reinforced the perception that she was primarily concerned with maternal health rather than intelligence operations. Dr. Novak led Joanna through the facility's main research areas, pointing out laboratories dedicated to different aspects of environmental health research. The tour was designed to familiarize legitimate researchers with available resources, but Joanna used it to memorize sight lines, identify security cameras, and note potential defensive positions. Her trained eye cataloged details that would be crucial if the facility came under attack: reinforced walls that could provide cover, emergency exits that might be compromised, and communication systems that could be disabled. "This is our secured research wing," Dr. Novak explained as they approached a corridor marked with additional security checkpoints. "We conduct our most sensitive work here, including our collaboration with American researchers on classified medical protocols." Joanna nodded with appropriate scientific curiosity. I'd love to learn more about the American collaboration. Are there opportunities for interaction with visiting researchers? Actually, yes. Dr. Viktor Kozlov is currently working on radiation exposure effects that complement your toxicology research perfectly. I'll arrange an introduction once you're settled in your laboratory space. Meeting Kozlov was crucial for the mission's success. Joanna needed to assess his mental state, understand his daily routines, and identify potential evacuation routes if Russian forces breached the facility's security. But the introduction would need to appear completely natural, the kind of academic collaboration that happened routinely in research environments. Joanna's assigned laboratory was strategically located on the secured wing's second floor, with windows overlooking the facility's main entrance and parking areas. The space came equipped with sophisticated analytical equipment that would allow her to conduct legitimate research while maintaining her cover. More importantly, the laboratory's location provided excellent observation points for monitoring potential threats approaching the facility. Her first task was establishing credible research activities that would justify her presence throughout the facility. Joanna began analyzing soil samples that supposedly contained industrial contaminants, work that required frequent consultations with other researchers and access to shared equipment in different laboratory areas. Each legitimate scientific task provided opportunities to map the facility's layout, identify security personnel, and observe daily routines that could be exploited during an emergency. The afternoon brought her first encounter with Dr. Viktor Kozlov during a scheduled consultation about research methodologies. Kozlov was a thin man in his early 50s with prematurely gray hair and eyes that constantly scanned his surroundings with nervous energy. His hands trembled slightly when he spoke, evidence of the psychological stress that came with knowing Russian intelligence agencies wanted him dead or disappeared. "Dr. Walsh," Kozlov said in careful English, "Dr. Novak tells me you're studying environmental effects on pregnancy. This is important work. Chemicals can affect developing life in ways we're only beginning to understand." Joanna engaged him in detailed scientific discussion, using her preparation to ask intelligent questions about his radiation research while subtly assessing his psychological state. Kozlov was clearly traumatized by his defection experience, but his scientific mind remained sharp and focused. He discussed his work with passion that suggested he genuinely believed his knowledge could save lives. During their conversation, Joanna noticed several concerning details. Kozlov had developed obsessive security habits, checking windows repeatedly, positioning himself with clear views of all entrances, and carrying what appeared to be emergency communication devices. His paranoia was justified, but it also made him unpredictable. If Russian forces attacked the facility, his panic could complicate evacuation procedures or compromise defensive positions. "Dr. Kozlov," Joanna said carefully, "have you experienced any unusual security concerns here? As an expectant mother, I'm naturally anxious about workplace safety protocols." Kozlov's expression darkened immediately. "Dr. Walsh, I must tell you this. Work involves dangerous people who will stop at nothing to prevent certain information from reaching American authorities. If you're concerned about safety, perhaps you should consider relocating your research to a different facility." His warning was clearly intended to protect her, but it also confirmed that he knew his presence put everyone at the facility at risk. Joanna filed this information while maintaining her concerned expectant mother persona. "I appreciate your honesty, Dr. Kozlov. Perhaps we could discuss emergency procedures. I want to ensure I know how to protect myself and my baby if any problems arise." That evening, Joanna explored the facility's layout more thoroughly under the guise of familiarizing herself with after-hours security procedures. The building's basement levels contained storage areas, mechanical rooms, and a tunnel system that connected to Prague's historic underground passages. These areas would be crucial during any defensive action. They could provide escape routes, defensive positions, or unfortunately, infiltration paths for attacking forces, her pregnancy had proven to be the perfect operational camouflage. Security. Personnel viewed her as a legitimate researcher whose primary concerns involved maternal health and workplace safety. Other scientists treated her with the protective courtesy typically shown to expectant mothers, offering assistance and sharing information freely. Even Kozlov, despite his paranoia, seemed more relaxed around someone he perceived as non-threatening. But Joanna's most important discovery came during her late-evening reconnaissance of the facility's perimeter. While examining emergency exits, under the pretense of pregnancy-related safety concerns, she identified signs of recent surveillance activity. Fresh tire tracks in secluded areas, cigarette butts from unfamiliar tobacco brands, and subtle disturbances in landscaping that suggested someone had been conducting detailed observations of the facility's defenses. The Russian extraction team was already in Prague, conducting final preparation for their assault. Joanna estimated they had perhaps 36 hours before the attack began. Her mission had just shifted from infiltration to active defense, and her unborn child was about to become both her greatest vulnerability and her most powerful weapon in the battle that was coming. Tomorrow would bring the test of whether a pregnant woman could outthink, outfight, and outmaneuver an elite military unit trained to kill without hesitation. The enemy still had no idea what was waiting for them inside the facility, hidden behind the gentle facade of expectant motherhood. The second day at the Prague Medical Research Institute dawned with deceptive tranquility. Joanna arrived early, using her status as a dedicated researcher to justify accessing the facility before normal operating hours. The morning security guard, Pavel, had already grown accustomed to her routine and greeted her with the protective courtesy reserved for pregnant women. "Good morning, Dr. Walsh. You're here early again. Are you sure you should be working such long hours in your condition?" Joanna smiled and patted her small bump. "The baby seems to be most active in the early morning, so I might as well be productive. 2. Besides, I want to complete my environmental assessments before the facility gets too busy." Pavel nodded approvingly and buzzed her through the security checkpoint. What he didn't know was that Joanna had spent the previous night creating a detailed defensive plan for the facility, identifying weapon caches, and establishing communication protocols with her CIA handlers. Her early morning productivity involved converting innocent research equipment into potential defensive tools and mapping every possible escape route through the building's complex layout. The facility's morning routine provided perfect cover for Joanna's real activities. She moved through laboratories conducting legitimate research while simultaneously placing small surveillance devices in strategic locations. Her pregnancy gave her unlimited access to all areas colleagues naturally offered to help her reach high shelves, carry heavy equipment, and navigate stairs safely. Their protective instincts allowed her to access areas that might have been restricted to a standard researcher. Dr. Helena Novak found Joanna in the basement storage area, supposedly searching for archived research data on historical environmental contamination cases. In reality, Joanna was identifying positions where she could establish defensive firing positions if Russian forces breached the building through the underground tunnel system. "Dr. Walsh, you really shouldn't be wandering around down here alone," Dr. Novak said with maternal concern. "These old basement areas can be dangerous, uneven floors, poor lighting, potential chemical residues from decades of research." Joanna looked up from a filing cabinet she'd been examining, her expression appropriately sheepish. "I know, but I found references to some fascinating 1980s studies on industrial pollution that might inform my current research. Sometimes the historical data provides insights we wouldn't discover through modern testing alone." Her explanation was scientifically valid and personally motivated, exactly the kind of dedication that researchers understood and respected. Dr. Novak helped her locate the files she supposedly needed, while unknowingly providing detailed information about the basement's layout, electrical systems, and emergency protocols. These old communist-era facilities have some unusual features, Dr. Novak explained as they navigated the corridor. The basement connects to Prague's medieval tunnel system, originally built for defense during historical sieges. We keep those connections sealed for security reasons, but they're still accessible through the mechanical rooms. Joanna filed this crucial intelligence while maintaining her academic curiosity. That's fascinating from a historical perspective. Have there ever been security concerns about those tunnel connections? Not really. The seals are sophisticated, and the tunnel system is monitored by Prague police. Plus, who would want to break into a medical research facility? Dr. Novak laughed at the apparent absurdity of the idea. If only she knew, Joanna thought grimly. Those tunnel connections would likely be the primary infiltration route for Russian forces. The seals Dr. Novak mentioned were probably designed to keep out curious tourists and urban explorers, not elite military units equipped with explosives and cutting tools. The afternoon brought Joanna's second planned interaction with Dr. Viktor Kozlov, this time during a simulated emergency evacuation drill. The exercise was routine for medical facilities handling potentially dangerous materials, but it provided invaluable intelligence about how Kozlov would respond during an actual crisis. Kozlov's behavior during the drill was deeply concerning. Instead of following standard evacuation procedures, he immediately became suspicious and agitated, demanding to know who had ordered the exercise and whether it represented a genuine security threat. His paranoia, while understandable, made him unpredictable and difficult to protect. Dr. Kozlov, Joanna approached him during the post-drill briefing. I noticed you seemed concerned about the evacuation procedures. As someone who's pregnant, I'm naturally anxious about emergency protocols. Do you have specific safety concerns I should be aware of? Kozlov studied her carefully, his intelligence analyst training evident in how he assessed her motivations. Dr. Walsh, you seem like a genuine person who cares about scientific truth. But this facility, there are people who want to prevent certain research from reaching the public. If anything unusual happens, anything at all, you should leave immediately and contact American authorities. His warning was both touching and terrifying. Kozlov was trying to protect her based on his perception of her as an innocent pregnant researcher, not knowing that she was actually his designated protector. But his advice also revealed that he expected an attack soon and had prepared his own contingency plans that might conflict with her defensive strategy. Joanna spent the late afternoon conducting what appeared to be routine equipment calibration, but was actually weapons preparation. The facility's chemical storage areas contained compounds that could be weaponized with basic chemistry knowledge. Laboratory equipment could be converted into improvised explosive devices or communication jammers. Even medical supplies offered defensive possibilities. Surgical instruments, pharmaceutical compounds, and sterilization equipment all had potential. Tactical applications. Her pregnancy continued to provide perfect operational cover. When security personnel found her in restricted areas, her explanation was always pregnancy-related, checking air quality in different parts of the building, ensuring emergency exits were accessible for someone with mobility limitations, or locating the nearest medical facilities in case of pregnancy complications. Every question was answered with maternal concern that no one questioned or challenged. The evening brought ominous developments. While supposedly working late on research data analysis, Joanna monitored electronic surveillance equipment she discreetly installed around the facility's perimeter. The devices detected increased communication traffic in the area radio signals. Using Russian military encryption protocols and cellular phone activity consistent with coordinated surveillance operations, most telling was a brief interaction she observed through the facility's security cameras. A utility worker had appeared at the building's service entrance, claiming to investigate reports of gas leaks in the underground infrastructure. The worker's credentials appeared legitimate, but his behavior suggested military training. He moved with tactical awareness, scanning for security cameras and defensive positions while supposedly checking utility connections. Joanna recognized the classic pattern of pre-assault reconnaissance. The Russian extraction team was conducting final preparation, testing security responses, and identifying potential obstacles to their planned operation. Based on the level of activity she detected, the attack would likely come within the next 12 to 18 hours. She activated her emergency communication protocol, sending coded messages to CIA handlers through academic research databases that appeared to contain routine scholarly correspondence. The messages confirmed the imminent threat and requested immediate extraction authorization for Dr. Kozlov, but she knew that even if approval came quickly, there might not be time to implement a standard evacuation before Russian forces struck. That night, Joanna sat in her small Prague apartment, supposedly reviewing research notes but actually finalizing her defensive strategy. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was preparing for deadly combat while nurturing new life, planning to kill while protecting innocence, fighting for the future while carrying that future inside her body. Her unborn child had become central to do the mission's success in ways no one could have anticipated. The pregnancy that made her appear vulnerable actually made her invisible to enemy threat assessment. Russian intelligence would be looking for CIA operatives, military personnel, and security specialists. They would never suspect that their greatest opposition was a pregnant woman whose maternal instincts had evolved into protective lethality. Tomorrow would bring the test of whether love could be more powerful than violence, whether creation could triumph over destruction. Joanna Fleming was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous person in any room is the one who has the most to protect and the least to lose. The storm was coming, and she would be ready. The attack began at 3:47 a.m. with surgical precision. That spoke of months of planning. Joanna woke in her apartment to the subtle vibration of her encrypted phone, 3 short pulses that meant immediate danger. Her CIA handlers had detected massive electronic interference around the Prague Medical Research Institute, the kind of signal jamming that preceded coordinated military operations. She was dressed and moving within 90 seconds. Her pregnancy requiring slightly more time to navigate the stairs of her apartment building. The pre-dawn streets of Prague were empty except for a few delivery trucks and early commuters, but Joanna's trained eye spotted the anomalies immediately. 2 black sedans parked in positions that provided sightlines to the medical facility. A utility van positioned near the facility's main electrical junction. And most telling, a complete absence of the homeless individuals who normally sheltered in doorways near the institute. The area had been cleared and secured by professionals. Joanna's taxi driver was chatty in the way that early morning drivers often were, discussing Prague's beautiful architecture and asking about her work at the medical facility. She responded with appropriate small talk, while mentally reviewing her defensive plan and checking the concealed equipment she'd managed to smuggle into the country despite enhanced security screening. Pregnancy had advantages that even experienced intelligence operatives rarely considered. You work very early hours for someone expecting a baby, the driver observed with grandfatherly concern. In my country, pregnant women rest more, work less. Scientific research doesn't follow normal schedules, Joanna replied with a rueful smile. Besides, the baby seems to be most active at night anyway. I might as well be productive during the hours when sleep is impossible. What she didn't mention was that her insomnia had nothing to do with pregnancy discomfort and everything to do with the certainty that this morning would bring violence that could cost her both her life and her child's future. The taxi dropped her at the facility's main entrance. Just as the first signs of the assault became visible, Dr. Helena Novak's car was in her usual parking space, unusual for 4:15 a.m., even for someone known to work irregular hours. Through the facility's ground floor windows, Joanna could see lights in areas that should have been empty, and shadows moving in patterns that suggested more people were inside than should have been present during night shift operations. Pavel, the security guard who had become protective of her routine, buzzed her through the entrance with unusual nervousness. His greeting was stiff and formal, completely different from his typical warmth. "Good morning, Dr. Walsh. Dr. Novak asked me to tell you that she'd like to see you in her office as soon as you arrive." Joanna's training screamed warnings. Dr. Novak had never requested early morning meetings, and Pavel's body language suggested he was operating under duress. Someone was inside the facility who shouldn't be there, and they were using the staff to maintain an appearance of normalcy while positioning for whatever was coming next. Of course, Joanna responded cheerfully, placing a protective hand over her bump in the gesture that had become her signature. "Is everything all right? Dr. Novak isn't usually here this early." Pavel's eyes darted toward the security cameras before returning to her face. "She mentioned some urgent matters regarding your research project. Nothing to worry about." The phrase, "nothing to worry about," was almost certainly a distress signal. Pavel was trying to warn her while appearing cooperative to whoever was monitoring their conversation. Joanna made her way toward Dr. Novak's office, but instead of taking the direct route, she detoured through the basement storage areas where she'd placed surveillance equipment the previous day. The basement was empty, but signs of recent activity were everywhere: opened access panels, disturbed dust patterns, and most alarming, several severed cables that had connected emergency communication systems to Prague Police Headquarters. Facility had been compromised from within, but the invasion was still in preparation phases. Whoever was running the operation wanted to maintain the illusion of normal operations until their objectives were achieved. That suggested they needed time to locate and secure Dr. Kozlov without triggering alarms that might bring Czech authorities or American reinforcements. Joanna activated a concealed communication device and sent a brief, encrypted message to her handlers. "Package compromised. Wolves in the house. Initiating protection protocol." The message would alert CIA command that Russian forces had infiltrated the facility and that she was beginning active defensive measures. Dr. Novak's office was on the facility's second floor, accessible through a corridor lined with windows overlooking the main parking area. As Joanna climbed the stairs, she observed 3 additional vehicles that hadn't been there the previous evening: a medical supply truck, a Czech government sedan, and a maintenance van. All appeared legitimate, but their positioning provided perfect staging areas for assault teams. The office door was slightly ajar, unusual for someone as security conscious as Dr. Novak. Joanna paused outside, listening carefully for voices or movement that might indicate the number of people inside. What she heard made her blood run cold. Dr. Novak speaking in rapid, nervous Czech, followed by a male voice responding in accented English with unmistakably Russian pronunciation. "Dr. Kozlov's location has been confirmed in the secured wing. He maintains his regular scheduled laboratory work from 6 a.m. until noon. Lunch in his quarters, afternoon consultations until 8 p.m. Security is minimal during early morning hours." "Excellent. And the American researcher?" "Dr. Walsh is pregnant and poses no operational threat. She arrives early for personal reasons related to her condition and works in areas distant from Dr. Kozlov's laboratory. She can be contained or eliminated as circumstances require." Joanna felt a surge of protective rage that had nothing to do with her training and everything to do with the life growing inside her. They were discussing her elimination with the casual indifference used for removing obstacles to efficiency. Her unborn child was being dismissed as collateral damage in their operational planning, but their casual dismissal was also their greatest tactical error. They had observed her routine, assessed her threat level, and concluded that a pregnant researcher represented no danger to elite military operatives. It was exactly the kind of assumption that had made her legendary in intelligence circles. The fatal underestimation that came when people confused appearance with capability. Joanna retreated from the office door and made her way to her laboratory, maintaining the appearance of normal morning routine while internally switching to full combat mode. Her laboratory had been chosen specifically for its strategic position windows overlooking approach routes, emergency exits leading to multiple escape paths, and access to chemical storage areas that could be weaponized within minutes. The morning light revealed the full scope of the threat she was facing. Through her laboratory windows, she could see at least 8 individuals positioned around the facility's perimeter, all wearing civilian clothes but moving with military precision. Additional personnel were likely already inside the building, maintaining the illusion of normalcy while preparing for the primary assault. Dr. Kozlov would arrive for his regular laboratory schedule in approximately 90 minutes, completely unaware that Russian extraction teams were waiting for him. The facility's legitimate staff had been compromised or coerced into cooperation, leaving Joanna as the only obstacle between Kozlov and either death or disappearance. She began converting her laboratory into a defensive position, using legitimate research activities as cover for weapon preparation. Chemical compounds became explosive devices. Laboratory equipment transformed into communication jammers and surveillance systems. Medical supplies provided materials for improvised weapons and defensive barriers. Most importantly, she established multiple escape routes that took advantage of her intimate knowledge of the facility's layout. If forced to evacuate Kozlov under fire, she needed paths that could accommodate her pregnancy-related mobility limitations while providing cover from multiple assault teams. The irony was profound. Her pregnancy, which made her appear helpless, had actually given her unprecedented access to intelligence and defensive positions. The same maternal instincts that made enemies dismiss her as non-threatening had evolved into protective capabilities that bordered on supernatural. At 5:30 a.m., her encrypted phone vibrated with a message from CIA command: extraction impossible. Unknown timeframe for support. Protect package at all costs. Authorization for any means necessary. Joanna Fleming was on her own, pregnant and outnumbered, facing professional killers who had no idea they were about to encounter the most dangerous version of motherhood imaginable. The battle for Dr. Kozlov's life and her unborn child's future was about to begin. Dr. Viktor Kozlov arrived at the Prague Medical Research Institute at precisely 6:02 a.m., following the rigid schedule that had become his psychological anchor in a world where paranoia was justified. Joanna watched from her laboratory window as his taxi pulled into the parking area, noting how the driver seemed unusually nervous and departed immediately after dropping off his passenger, behavior that suggested the extraction team had already begun manipulating civilian support systems. Kozlov entered the building through the main entrance, exchanging his customary brief greeting with Pavel before making his way toward the secured wing. What he didn't know was that Pavel was now operating under duress, his family being held as leverage to ensure cooperation. The security guard's strained smile and mechanical responses were invisible to someone focused on his own survival, but crystal clear to someone trained in operational psychology. Joanna had 47 minutes before Kozlov would discover that his laboratory had been compromised. Russian operatives had spent the early morning hours installing surveillance equipment and positioning personnel throughout the facility. Their plan was elegant in its simplicity: allow Kozlov to begin his normal routine, then overwhelm him with superior numbers while eliminating potential witnesses. The pregnant American researcher would be contained or killed as operational requirements dictated, but they had made the classic intelligence error of confusing cover identity with actual capability. At 6:15 a.m., Joanna made her move. She gathered research materials that concealed improvised weapons and communication equipment, then made her way toward Kozlov's laboratory using maintenance corridors that avoided primary surveillance coverage. Her pregnancy required careful navigation of stairs and narrow passages, but it also provided perfect justification for her presence in areas where other personnel might be questioned. The secured wings corridor was empty except for a maintenance worker installing what appeared to be updated lighting fixtures. Joanna recognized the tactical earpiece partially concealed beneath his work cap and the way his tool bag was positioned for quick access to weapons rather than electrical equipment. She approached with the slightly waddling gait that pregnancy imposed, one hand on her lower back in universal expectant mother body language. "Excuse me," she said in Czech with a worried expression. "I'm looking for Dr. Kozlov's laboratory. I'm collaborating with him on environmental toxicity research, and I have some pregnancy-related questions about chemical exposure protocols." The operative glanced at her dismissively, noting her obvious pregnancy and civilian researcher appearance. "Laboratory 4B, down the corridor. But Dr. Kozlov doesn't like interruptions during morning work hours." "I understand, but this is somewhat urgent. Pregnancy complications can't always wait for convenient scheduling." She patted her bump anxiously, reinforcing the image of a concerned, expectant mother dealing with medical worries. The operative returned to his installation work, already dismissing her as irrelevant to operational planning. It was exactly the reaction Joanna had counted on. Maternal concerns were so universally understood and respected that they provided nearly invisible operational cover. Laboratory 4B was at the corridor's end, its reinforced door designed to contain chemical accidents but equally effective at muffling sounds of violence. Joanna knocked softly and called out in English, "Dr. Kozlov? It's Dr. Walsh from Johns Hopkins. I have some urgent questions about chemical exposure protocols." Kozlov opened the door with his characteristic nervous caution, scanning the corridor before focusing on her. "Dr. Walsh, this is very early for consultation. Is there a problem with your research? May I come in? I'd prefer to discuss this privately." Joanna's tone carried maternal vulnerability mixed with scientific urgency, exactly the combination that would resonate with Kozlov's protective instincts and intellectual curiosity. Once inside the laboratory with the door closed, Joanna's demeanor shifted completely. Her voice dropped to urgent whisper, "Dr. Kozlov, Russian operatives have infiltrated the facility. They're planning to extract you within the next 30 minutes. We need to leave immediately." Kozlov's face went pale, but his response revealed why he had survived long enough to defect in the first place. Instead of panic, he showed calculating intelligence. "Who are you really, Dr. Walsh?" "CIA. My pregnancy is real, but my identity is operational cover. I'm here to protect you, but we have very little time before they move to secure this laboratory." Kozlov studied her carefully, his analyst training evident in how he processed this information. A pregnant operative. That's either brilliant or insane. "Both," Joanna admitted. "Right now it's our only advantage. They've observed my routine and dismissed me as non-threatening. But that advantage disappears the moment they realize what's happening. What do you need me to do?" Before Joanna could respond, the laboratory's ventilation system suddenly shut down, a sign that someone was preparing to introduce incapacitating gas or smoke into the room. The extraction was beginning ahead of schedule, possibly triggered by surveillance indicating that Kozlov wasn't following his normal solitary routine. Change of plans, Joanna said, moving toward the laboratory's emergency equipment. "They're not waiting for the scheduled extraction time. We're about to be gassed or smoked out." She opened an emergency cabinet and began removing items that appeared to be standard safety equipment but could serve defensive purposes: gas masks, emergency oxygen supplies, and chemical neutralization compounds that could be weaponized with basic chemistry knowledge. "Dr. Walsh, or whoever you really are, I should tell you that I've prepared my own emergency protocols, Kozlov said, producing a small device from his jacket pocket. Dead man switch. If I'm captured or killed, automated systems will transmit all my research data to American intelligence agencies and international media simultaneously. Joanna felt a mixture of admiration and concern. Kozlov's contingency planning was sophisticated, but it also meant that killing him would serve Russian objectives as effectively as capturing him alive. They could prevent his knowledge from reaching American authorities, while simultaneously destroying his credibility through posthumous character assassination. That's smart, but it also makes you expendable to them, Joanna explained. They'd rather see you dead than in American custody. This isn't just an extraction, it's an elimination mission disguised as extraction. The laboratory door's electronic lock began cycling. Someone was overriding security systems to gain access. Joanna moved to the room's secondary exit, a maintenance door that connected to the facility's utility corridors. But as she reached for the handle, the distinctive sound of tactical movement echoed from the corridor beyond. They were surrounded. Dr. Kozlov, how important is your research data to preventing mass casualties? Critical. The biological weapons I discovered could kill millions if deployed properly. And they're designed to target specific genetic markers, essentially ethnic bioweapons. Joanna felt her unborn child shift inside her, as if responding to the magnitude of what was at stake. This wasn't just about protecting a defector or preventing Russian intelligence coups. This was about preventing genocide disguised as natural epidemic. Then we're going to have to fight our way out, she said, checking the improvised weapons she'd prepared. Stay behind me. Follow my instructions exactly. And remember, they need you alive until they're certain your dead man switch won't activate. That gives us leverage. The main laboratory door burst open as Russian operatives deployed smoke grenades and prepared to storm the room. But instead of finding a terrified, pregnant researcher and a cooperative defector, they encountered something no amount of tactical training had prepared them for. Joanna Fleming was about to demonstrate that maternal instincts, when combined with elite operational training, created the most formidable opponent imaginable, someone with everything to protect and nothing left to lose. The battle for Dr. Kozlov's life was about to become a masterclass in how pregnancy could transform from vulnerability into the ultimate tactical advantage. The wolves had entered the den, but they had no idea they were facing a lioness protecting not just one life, but two. The first Russian operative through the laboratory door expected to find a pregnant researcher cowering behind furniture and a terrified defector ready to surrender. Instead, he encountered a precisely thrown chemical beaker that shattered against his tactical helmet, releasing a cloud of industrial-grade sulfuric acid that sent him screaming back into the corridor while clawing at his face mask. Joanna had positioned herself behind a reinforced laboratory bench, using equipment that appeared defensive but was actually carefully arranged to provide both cover and offensive capabilities. Her pregnancy meant she couldn't move with the fluid grace of her pre-motherhood operations, but it also meant her opponents would hesitate before using lethal force against someone they perceived as carrying innocent life. Gas masks now, she shouted to Kozlov, tossing him emergency respiratory equipment while donning her own. The laboratory's ventilation shutdown had been preparation for chemical incapacitation, but Joanna had anticipated this tactic and prepared countermeasures using the facility's own safety protocols. The second wave of operatives entered with professional caution, their movements coordinated and their equipment sophisticated. But they were operating under rules of engagement that required Kozlov's capture alive and created hesitation about using maximum force against a pregnant civilian. Those split seconds of tactical uncertainty were all Joanna needed. She triggered a modified fire suppression system that filled the laboratory with dense foam designed to suppress chemical fires. The foam reduced visibility to near zero while providing concealment for movement. What the operatives couldn't see was that Joanna had memorized every piece of equipment, every obstacle, and every potential weapon in the laboratory during her reconnaissance. Moving through the chaos with muscle memory precision, she reached the emergency chemical storage cabinet and began combining compounds that would create a controlled explosion, not enough to bring down the building, but sufficient to disable the assault team and create an escape opportunity. Her chemistry knowledge, combined with desperate maternal protection instincts, transformed routine laboratory supplies into sophisticated defensive weapons. Dr. Kozlov, on my signal, moved toward the maintenance door. She called out, her voice carrying clearly despite the tactical chaos surrounding them. Stay low. Follow the blue emergency lighting strips on the floor. The first explosion came from the corridor as Joanna's acid trap triggered additional chemical reactions in the operative's equipment. Screams and Russian profanity echoed through the facility as elite soldiers discovered that underestimating a pregnant chemist was a career-ending mistake. The acrid smell of burning tactical gear mixed with laboratory chemical odors created an atmosphere of controlled chaos that favored the defender who knew the terrain. But Joanna's advantage was temporary. More operatives were entering the building, and her chemical defenses would be exhausted within minutes. She needed to move Kozlov to a more defensible position while maintaining the initiative that came from unexpected resistance. "American operative," a voice called out in accented English. "You are outnumbered and surrounded. Surrender the scientist, and you will be allowed to leave unharmed. We have no interest in harming pregnant women." Joanna almost laughed at the absurdity. They were offering mercy based on her pregnancy while planning genocide with bioweapons that would target unborn children specifically. "Counteroffer," she shouted back. "Leave now and I won't turn this entire facility into a chemical weapons factory." To emphasize her point, she triggered another controlled reaction that sent a geyser of smoke and flame shooting toward the ceiling. The message was clear. She had both the knowledge and materials to escalate this confrontation, far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Kozlov had reached the maintenance door, but his attempts to open it revealed another problem. "It's locked from the outside," he reported. "They've secured all the emergency exits." Joanna had anticipated this possibility. During her reconnaissance, she'd identified multiple escape routes, including some that weren't marked on any facility blueprints. "Follow me. We're going through the wall." The laboratory's construction included a shared utility space with the adjacent chemical storage room. Joanna began clearing equipment away from what appeared to be a solid wall but was actually a removable panel designed for emergency access to utility systems. Her pregnancy made the physical work more challenging, but adrenaline and maternal protection instincts provided strength that surprised even her. "You're insane," Kozlov observed, but he was helping her move laboratory equipment to create access to the hidden panel. Asterisk, sanity is a luxury we can't afford right now, Joanna replied, using a laboratory tool to remove the panel's concealed fasteners. Besides, they expect rational behavior from pregnant women. Unpredictability is our tactical advantage. The utility space beyond the wall was cramped and dark, filled with pipes and electrical conduits that made movement difficult. But it also connected to the facility's main mechanical systems, providing access to areas that wouldn't appear on tactical assault plans. More importantly, it led to the basement tunnel system that connected to Prague's historic underground. Passages dot as they crawled through the utility space. Sounds of additional explosions echoed from the laboratory they'd abandoned. The Russian operatives were discovering that Joanna's chemical preparations had included time-delayed reactions, designed to continue causing problems long after she'd left the area. Her pregnancy might have slowed her physical capabilities, but it had also forced her to rely more heavily on intelligence and preparation, advantages that were proving decisive. Asterisk. How did you know about these passages? Kozlov asked as they emerged into a basement corridor that wasn't shown on any facility. Maps, maternal instincts, Joanna replied with grim humor. When you're responsible for protecting innocent life, you notice things that others miss. I spent 3 days mapping every possible escape route in this building. The tunnel system that Dr. Novak had mentioned during Joanna's first day was more extensive than anyone had realized. Medieval passages carved from Prague's bedrock connected not just to the facility's basement, but to a network of underground routes that extended throughout the historic city center. The tunnels had been used for defense during historical sieges, storage during communist rule, and now provided the perfect escape route for a pregnant operative protecting humanity's future. But as they made their way through the underground passages, Joanna's encrypted communication device revealed disturbing news. Russian operatives had taken hostages among the facility's legitimate staff, including Dr. Novak and Pavel. The assault team was demanding Kozlov's surrender in exchange for the hostages' lives, while simultaneously threatening to eliminate everyone in the building if he attempted to escape. "They're forcing us into an impossible choice," Kozlov said after Joanna shared the intelligence update. "Save the hostages or save the research data that could prevent genocide." Joanna felt her unborn child move inside her, a reminder of what was truly at stake. This wasn't just about tactical victories or intelligence operations. This was about the kind of world her child would inherit, one where bioweapons could target specific populations, or one where such weapons were prevented from ever being deployed. "There's a third option," she said, studying the tunnel map she'd memorized during her preparation. "We don't choose between the hostages and the data, we save both." Her plan was audacious to the point of insanity. Instead of escaping through the tunnels, they would use the underground passages to infiltrate back into the facility from an unexpected direction. While Russian operatives secured the building's obvious exits and maintained control of hostages, Joanna would strike from below, using the same tunnel system that the enemy had probably planned to use for their own infiltration. "You're pregnant," Kozlov protested. "This kind of operation is suicide even for healthy operatives." "Exactly," Joanna replied. "That's why it will work. They'll never expect a pregnant woman to mount a counter-assault against a superior force." Maternal protection instincts don't follow tactical doctrine. They follow whatever path leads to the safest future for innocent life. As they moved through Prague's underground labyrinth toward what would either be a rescue operation or a final stand, Joanna realized that her pregnancy had become more than operational cover. It had become the source of a kind of courage that had nothing to do with training and everything to do with love for a child who deserved to be born into a world free from the horrors that men like these operatives wanted to unleash. The lioness was returning to her den, and the hunters were about to discover that they had gravely underestimated what a mother would do to protect not just her own child, but all children everywhere. The medieval tunnels beneath Prague told stories of siege and survival that stretched back 7 centuries. As Joanna Fleming navigated the stone passages with Dr. Viktor Kozlov, she realized she was adding another chapter to that history, one where a pregnant woman would either save innocent lives or die trying. The tunnel system was more complex than any blueprint had indicated, branching into networks that connected basements, sewers, and forgotten chambers carved during times when Prague's survival depended on hidden pathways. The facility's basement has 3 access points from these tunnels, Joanna explained in whispered tones as they moved through passages lit only by her tactical flashlight. The Russian team probably used the main connection for their infiltration, but there are 2 others they won't be monitoring. One leads to the mechanical room where the electrical systems are housed. The other connects to the old morgue in the basement's east wing. Kozlov struggled to keep pace through the cramped stone corridors, his sedentary lifestyle making the physical demands challenging. "What exactly are you planning? Even if we can get back inside undetected, we're still outnumbered by professional Soldiers. Joanna paused at a junction where 3 passages converged, consulting the mental map she'd created during her reconnaissance. We're not going to fight them directly. We're going to turn the facility itself into a weapon. This building has systems they don't understand and vulnerabilities they haven't identified. Her plan was emerging from a combination of tactical analysis and maternal desperation. The Russian operatives had taken control of the facility by exploiting its normal operations, but they were unfamiliar with its emergency protocols and safety systems. Joanna's days of seemingly innocent research had given her intimate knowledge of chemical storage areas, ventilation systems, and emergency procedures that could be weaponized by someone with advanced chemistry knowledge and nothing left to lose. Facility's chemical storage contains compounds used for legitimate medical research. She continued as they approached the mechanical room access point. But in the right combinations, those same chemicals become incapacitating agents that can be distributed through the ventilation system. We can neutralize the assault team without endangering the hostages. That's assuming the ventilation controls aren't being monitored, Kozlov pointed out. They are being monitored, Joanna admitted. But by people who think they're watching. For escape attempts, not infiltration from below. And they definitely aren't expecting the pregnant biochemist to turn their controlled environment into a gas chamber. The access panel to the mechanical room had been sealed with modern security locks, but the medieval stonework around it showed signs of age and wear. Joanna used tools from her emergency kit to carefully remove mortar and stone around the panel, creating an opening large enough for them to squeeze through. Her pregnancy made the tight space challenging, but determination and adrenaline provided motivation that overcame physical limitations. The facility's mechanical room was a maze of pipes, electrical panels, and computer systems that controlled everything from temperature to air circulation. More importantly, it contained the master controls for the building's emergency systems, including chemical containment protocols designed to prevent accidental exposure to dangerous research materials. Dr. Kozlov, I need you to access the computer system and locate the hostage positions, Joanna said as she began examining the chemical storage manifests displayed on wall-mounted charts. Your security clearance should still be active, and the system will show internal surveillance data. While Kozlov worked at the computer terminal, Joanna studied the facility's chemical inventory with the focused intensity of someone whose unborn child's future depended on getting the calculations exactly right. She needed compounds that would incapacitate armed operatives without causing permanent harm to civilian hostages, distributed through ventilation systems in precise concentrations that would affect different areas of the building at calculated intervals. I've accessed the surveillance system, Kozlov reported. Hostages are being held in the main conference room on the 2nd floor. 6 civilians, including Dr. Novak and Pavel. 4 Russian operatives are guarding them, with at least 8 more positioned throughout the building. Joanna continued her chemical analysis, cross-referencing compounds with ventilation zone maps to determine optimal distribution strategies. That's actually perfect. The conference room has its own air circulation system that can be isolated from the rest of the building. We can neutralize the guards holding hostages without affecting our own operations in other areas. Her pregnancy had forced her to think differently about tactical operations, relying more heavily on intelligence and preparation rather than physical confrontation. But it had also given her access to knowledge and areas that traditional operatives might have overlooked. The facility's maternal health research meant it contained sophisticated monitoring equipment for detecting chemical exposure, risks during pregnancy equipment that could be repurposed for tactical use. There's something else, Kozlov said, continuing to review surveillance data. They've connected external communication equipment to the facility systems. It looks like they're preparing to transmit data, possibly my research files, to external locations. This intelligence changed everything. The Russian operation wasn't just about extracting or eliminating Kozlov. They were planning to steal his research data and distribute it to multiple locations simultaneously. Even if his dead man's switch activated, they would already have copies of the bioweapons information in their possession. How long until transmission is complete? Joanna asked, beginning to prepare chemical compounds with the precision of someone whose child's future depended on perfect measurements. Based on the data transfer rates, approximately 47 minutes, Kozlov replied. But that assumes they don't encounter additional resistance or technical difficulties. Joanna felt her unborn child shift inside her, as if responding to the urgency of what was unfolding. This wasn't just about preventing the capture of one defector anymore. This was about preventing ethnic bioweapons from becoming available to terrorist organizations and rogue states around the world. The stakes had escalated beyond anything she'd trained for, but maternal instincts provided clarity that cut through tactical complexity. "We're going to stop that transmission," she said with absolute certainty. "But first, we save the hostages." She began introducing calculated amounts of aerosolized sedatives into the conference room's air circulation system, using concentrations that would incapacitate armed guards within minutes, while causing minimal effects to civilians who weren't engaged in strenuous physical activity. The chemistry was precise to the point of artistry. Too little, and the guards would remain operational. Too much, and innocent people would suffer permanent harm. "Dr. Kozlov, can you access the facility's communication systems from here?" Joanna asked as she monitored gas distribution through the building's environmental controls. "Yes, but any outgoing communication will be detected by their monitoring equipment. I'm not planning outgoing communication. I need to override their transmission protocols and introduce corrupted data into whatever they're trying to steal from your research files." Kozlov's eyes widened with understanding. "You want to poison their data streams. Give them information that appears legitimate, but contains fatal flaws that will make any bioweapons development impossible." "Exactly. If we can't prevent them from stealing your research, we can at least ensure that what they steal will kill anyone who tries to use it." As the sedative gases began taking effect in the conference room, surveillance monitors showed Russian guards becoming disoriented and confused. Within 8 minutes, all 4 operatives guarding the hostages had collapsed unconscious, while the civilian hostages remained alert but groggy, exactly the outcome Joanna's calculations had predicted. "Phase 1 complete," she reported. "Hostages are secure. Now we need to corrupt their data transmission and eliminate the remaining assault team before they realize what's happening." But as they prepared for the operation's next phase, alerts began flashing on the facility's security systems. Someone had detected the chemical attack on the conference room, and the remaining Russian operatives were adapting their tactics with professional efficiency. The easy part of the mission was over. Joanna Fleming was about to discover that protecting her unborn child meant engaging in the most dangerous firefight of her career, while simultaneously conducting advanced chemical warfare from a basement mechanical room. Motherhood was about to become the ultimate test of her operational capabilities. The facility's emergency alarms began wailing at 7:23 a.m., their piercing sound echoing through corridors where Russian operatives were discovering that their carefully planned operation had become a nightmare of chemical warfare and invisible enemies. From the basement mechanical room, Joanna Fleming monitored surveillance feeds showing 8 remaining Spetsnaz soldiers adapting to threats they'd never trained for: a pregnant biochemist who had turned their controlled environment into a lethal maze. "Data corruption is 70% complete," Dr. Viktor Kozlov reported from the computer terminal where he was systematically destroying his own research with surgical precision. "I'm embedding fatal calculation errors that will make any attempt to weaponize this information result in the bioweapons killing their creators instead of intended targets." Joanna continued monitoring the facility's chemical distribution systems while tracking operative movements through internal surveillance. Her pregnancy made rapid movement impossible, but it had also forced her to develop tactics that relied on intelligence rather than mobility. The building itself had become her weapon. Its laboratory equipment and emergency systems transformed into sophisticated delivery mechanisms for chemical warfare. "They're evacuating the main floors," she observed, watching tactical teams retreat toward exit points, but they're not abandoning the mission. They're regrouping for a final assault on this location. The Russian operatives had realized that their primary threats were coming from the facility's basement levels, where someone with intimate knowledge of building systems was conducting asymmetric warfare using methods no military training had prepared them for. Their response was predictably professional. They would flood the basement with overwhelming force, eliminating all threats regardless of collateral damage. "Dr. Kozlov, how much more time do you need to complete the data corruption?" 15 minutes for full corruption. But I can implement a virus that will destroy their copied files retroactively if you can give me 8 more minutes. Joanna felt her unborn child move restlessly inside her, as if sensing the danger that surrounded them. The baby's movements had become more frequent during high-stress situations, creating a constant reminder that she was fighting for 2 lives while conducting operations that violated every protocol about pregnant operatives in combat zones. 8 minutes, she confirmed. "I can give you 8 minutes. The mechanical room had multiple access points that would need to be defended simultaneously. But Joanna's reconnaissance had revealed something the Russian assault team didn't know. The facility's basement connected to Prague's municipal utility tunnels, including steam pipes that serviced multiple buildings in the historic district. If she could access those systems, the entire neighborhood could become part of her defensive perimeter. "There's something I need to tell you," Kozlov said as he continued working on data corruption protocols. "My research includes information about American biological defense programs. If the Russians obtain that intelligence, they'll know how to defeat every countermeasure our military has developed." This revelation transformed the mission's stakes completely. Joanna wasn't just preventing bioweapons from reaching enemy hands. She was protecting American defensive capabilities that had taken decades to develop. The failure of this operation could leave the United States vulnerable to biological attacks that would be impossible to counter. "Then we don't fail," she said with maternal certainty that defied tactical logic. The first assault came through the facility's main basement entrance, with 4 operatives using explosive charges to breach reinforced doors. But instead of finding defensive positions, they encountered corridors filled with aerosolized industrial solvents that ignited when they triggered their tactical lights. The resulting fireball didn't kill them, but it eliminated their equipment and left them unconscious. From chemical exposure, Joanna had spent her pregnancy learning to think like a mother. Protecting innocent life required considering threats from every possible direction and preparing responses that others wouldn't anticipate. That maternal thinking had evolved into tactical capabilities that bordered on supernatural intuition about danger and protection. "Second team approaching through utility access," she reported. "monitoring surveillance feeds while managing chemical distribution through building systems. They're wearing full chemical protection gear this time." The Russian operatives had adapted to her chemical warfare tactics, but they couldn't adapt to the building's structural features that she'd memorized during weeks of seemingly innocent research. As they advanced through utility corridors, Joanna triggered emergency steam releases that turned narrow passages into superheated chambers, capable of cooking anyone inside protective gear. "Data corruption complete," Kozlov announced. "Any research they've copied will now destroy itself and any systems it contacts. But there's a problem. They've locked down the facility's external communications. We can't signal for extraction. And my dead man switch won't activate if I'm killed here." Joanna studied the facility's systems overview, looking for solutions that others might miss. Her pregnancy had taught her to notice details that weren't obvious, subtle changes, unexpected connections, possibilities that existed outside normal parameters. What she found was exactly what maternal instincts had trained her to seek. The facility's fire suppression system connects to municipal emergency services, she realized. If we trigger a major chemical emergency alert, Prague Fire Department will respond with hazmat teams and American Embassy notification protocols. That will bring CIA extraction teams regardless of communication blackouts. But triggering such an alert would require releasing actual, dangerous chemicals into the facility's atmosphere, chemicals that could harm her unborn child and any remaining hostages. It was exactly the kind of impossible choice that motherhood demanded. Risk everything to protect everyone. Do it, Kozlov said without hesitation. My research data is secure. The hostages are already evacuated, and stopping this operation is worth any risk to ourselves. Joanna began the process of converting the facility's legitimate research chemicals into an actual environmental emergency. But instead of random destruction, she calculated release patterns that would create maximum alert response while minimizing actual exposure risk. Her chemistry knowledge, enhanced by pregnancy-heightened attention to safety details, allowed her to thread the needle between fake emergency and real catastrophe. The final assault came as Prague emergency services were receiving automated alerts about massive chemical contamination at the medical research facility. 8 remaining Russian operatives breached the mechanical room simultaneously, expecting to find defensive positions and operational equipment. Instead, they found a pregnant woman sitting calmly at a computer terminal, her hands folded protectively over her small bump. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Johns Hopkins University, Joanna said in clear English. I'm conducting research on environmental toxicity effects during pregnancy. Is there some kind of emergency? I've been working here all morning and haven't seen anyone else. The lead operative studied her with professional suspicion, noting her obvious pregnancy and civilian researcher appearance. Where is Dr. Viktor Kozlov? I haven't seen Dr. Kozlov since yesterday, Joanna replied with perfect maternal concern. Should I be worried? My condition makes me anxious about workplace safety. It was the performance of her career, a pregnant researcher who had somehow remained completely unaware of the tactical warfare that had been raging throughout the facility. Her pregnancy made the deception credible in ways that no amount of training could have achieved. Who would suspect an expectant mother of conducting advanced chemical warfare against elite military units? But as Prague emergency services surrounded the facility and CIA extraction teams approached through the tunnel system, the lead Russian operative made a calculation that demonstrated why he had survived years of dangerous operations. He didn't need to understand what had happened. He just needed to eliminate all potential witnesses. Dr. Walsh, he said, raising his weapon toward her, I'm afraid you've seen too much. That's when Dr. Viktor Kozlov stepped out from behind equipment racks where he'd been hidden during Joanna's deception. Actually, he said, she's seen exactly enough. The dead man's switch in his hand was connected to explosives that would destroy not just the facility, but several city blocks around it. The Russian operatives had been so focused on the pregnant woman that they'd forgotten about the defector. They'd come to capture. Your choice, Kozlov continued. Leave now and live, or stay and discover what happens when you threaten pregnant American operatives. 6 months later, Joanna Fleming gave birth to a healthy daughter at Georgetown University Hospital. The delivery room was secured by CIA personnel, and the birth certificate listed her occupation as research scientist, technically accurate, though it omitted details about the type of research she conducted. Dr. Viktor Kozlov had been successfully extracted and was working with American biological defense programs to develop countermeasures for ethnic bioweapons. The corrupted research data had destroyed 3 Russian biological weapons facilities when their scientists attempted to implement his deliberately flawed formulas. The Prague operation became a classified case study in unconventional warfare tactics, though the full details remained known only to a small group of intelligence professionals. The lesson was simple but profound. Sometimes the most dangerous operative in any situation is the one with the most to protect and the least to lose. Joanna returned to field operations 6 months after her daughter's birth, but with a new specialty training: other female operatives in pregnancy-based operational techniques. Her methods were now part of CIA curriculum, proving that motherhood wasn't a limitation on intelligence work, but a revolutionary approach to it. When asked about her most dangerous mission, Joanna would smile and say that infiltrating enemy lines while pregnant wasn't the hard part. The hard part was explaining to her daughter, years later, why Mommy's bedtime stories always seemed to involve chemistry sets and underground tunnels. Some secrets, after all, were too dangerous to remain buried. And some mothers were too dangerous to underestimate. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.